Welcome to All That You Need to Know. I am your host, your friendly neighborhood J-Man. Today, I'm giving you all that you need to know about Marvel Comics Civil War. No, not the movie. I'm talking about the comic book miniseries. Published in 2006, Civil War is a 7-issue miniseries written by Mark Millar and illustrated by Steve McNiven, building on the events of the Avengers Disassembled and House of M storylines. Civil War's premise involves the federal government instituting a superhero registration act which left the heroes of the Marvel U on opposite sides of a moral divide, only further emphasizing the miniseries tagline, "Whose side are you on?" The threads of Civil War can be traced all the way back to the early 1980s with writer Chris Claremont's run on the X-Men. Building on ideas laid down as early as Uncanny X-Men 141, Claremont introduced the Mutant Registration Act in Uncanny X-Men 181. The premise behind that act, mutants would have to register themselves and their powers to the federal government. Fast forward to 2006, Mark Millar would reintroduce the concept of the Registration Act. This time though, it wouldn't be mutants, it would be superpowered beings. And not only would they have to register, they'd also have to unmask, be trained, and work as agents of the government. In this case, being S.H.I.E.L.D. So how would something so draconian ever get instituted in the first place? Well, I'm glad you asked. Civil War opens up with the latest incarnation of the New Warriors, now a team of lower-tiered superheroes starring on a reality show. They're tracking down a bunch of baddies on the run. In all of the hullabaloo, yeah, I did just say hullabaloo, Namorito, cousin to Namor, and certainly not too original of a name, backed the villain Nitro into the proverbial corner. And he unproverbially caused an explosion that not only took out several city blocks in Stamford, Connecticut, but at an elementary school as well. The explosion was responsible for the deaths of 600 people, 60 of which were children. The public outcry to the destruction in Stamford, along with prior escalating events, led the United States government to introduce the Superhero Registration Act. Led by Tony Stark, Reed Richards, and Hank Pym, the bill required any being with superpowers to register with the federal government. A divisive move on their part, as it would drive a wedge right down the center of the superhero community, one that would further play out in a S.H.I.E.L.D. helicarrier between Captain America and Maria Hill. Assuming he would side with the government, Maria Hill, commander of S.H.I.E.L.D., questioned Cap about his allegiance to their cause. Hill certainly assumed wrong. When Cap expressed his trepidation for the act, Hill turned the power of S.H.I.E.L.D. against him and attempted to detain him. Of course, we are talking about Steve Rogers here. He made quick work of the armed S.H.I.E.L.D. agents trying to take him down, dove out of the carrier 6 miles above New York, and skitched the rest of the way down on a fighter jet. That fiasco would force Cap on the opposite side of the Superhero Registration Act, cementing his stance that superheroes should be afforded the ability to have secret identities and private lives as they always have. It would also force Cap to work underground. He wouldn't be alone though. Joining him were Falcon Sam Wilson and Power Man Luke Cage. Shortly after Cap's run-in with S.H.I.E.L.D., the Superhero Registration Act was written into law. Shit would only escalate from there. The first major hero to out himself was everyone's favorite wall crawler, Spider-Man. In a press conference before the whole world, Spider-Man unmasked himself as Peter Parker. Whatever. But Cap's crew, dubbed the Secret Avengers, would do some recruitment of their own, bringing into his fold by way of hijacking and then kidnapping the Young Avengers. Tensions between the sides would worsen until a trap laid by Stark and Richards would bring Cap and the Secret Avengers face to face with the pro-registration forces. Looking to avoid any conflict, Tony and Steve attempted, a little heart-to-heart. Attempted. Because during that heart-to-heart, Steve planted a bug on Tony that shorted out his armor, and Cap subsequently popped him square in the face. Damn. Talk about shit getting real. All hell would break loose with hero fighting hero and Cap and Iron Man duking it out center stage. The whole thing looked like it was a stalemate until Thor. Sidebar. For reasons too complicated to explain here, Thor up until this point had been off-world, and for some time. He was busy time traveling, resetting events, blah, blah, blah. Crazy shit. He ended up in a void of non-existence. Like I said, it's too complicated to explain here, but because of all that, the crew back at home presumed Thor to be dead. Wait a minute. I just said Thor turned up during the big fight, right? Well, sorta. Turns out Thor was another ace up Tony's sleeve. That Thor that came crackling down really is a clone created by Stark. Actually, he's a cybernetic clone of Thor. A mass of the real Thor's DNA plus some Stark tech thrown in. Clone Thor literally brings down the hammer on the anti-registration forces, but the big fake dude got a little out of hand and ended up killing one of Cap's people, Goliath. Now, a not overly well-known character and certainly not one seeing that much screen time in Civil War up to this point, Goliath shares Hank Pym's shrinking and growing powers. Let's just call the whole clone Thor killing Goliath a bit of weak writing and move on with things. Amidst the chaos, Cloak of Cloak and Dagger would teleport Cap and the rest of the Secret Avengers away from the fight. While they licked their wounds, the Secret Avengers learned of a maximum security prison that Tony and Reed had put together for any and all heroes unwilling to register, known as Project 42. The prison was built in the Negative Zone, an anti-universe that's largely uninhabited. Its existence cheese capped off to no end the existence of the prison, not the Negative Zone. I don't think Cap had any kind of opinion on the Negative Zone. Meanwhile, back at the ranch, there's an unease growing through Tony's ranks. Spider-Man, having a change of heart, confronts Tony about the prison and the use of the Thor clone. The two of them end up in fisticuffs. I swear to God, Tony's fighting everybody in this story. Spider-Man ends up leaving the Avengers and joining Cap's anti-registration forces, but not before getting his ass handed to him by Jack-O-Lantern and Jester, courtesy of Maria Hill and S.H.I.E.L.D. And because this thing is running a bit too long, let's wrap it all up by saying the two sides end up going at it again. Surprise, surprise. This time, though, thanks to Namor and the Atlanteans, Cap and the Secret Avengers get the upper hand, and as Cap is about to use his shield to literally separate Tony's head from his body, a bunch of emergency workers stop him, tackling Cap to the ground. This wakes Cap up to all the damage they're causing, and he surrenders to S.H.I.E.L.D. The end. Civil War #1 ended up selling over 260,000 copies in its first month alone. It would go on eventually to sell 328,000 copies, being surpassed by Civil War #2 with an estimated 341,000 in sales, and Civil War #3 selling 337,000 units. What's my take on Civil War? I don't know. While I understand where Millar was going with the Registration Act, in this case, the ends don't justify the means, and in a time with mass shootings on what seems a semi-regular basis, the destruction of the elementary school and the killing of the kids, it just leaves a bad taste in my mouth. The problem I have with comics like this and movies like Batman vs. Superman is that they're steeped so much in reality that they become too real. We have enough reality every day. Do we need to have it in our escapism as well? And don't even get me started on the unmasking of Spider-Man, who spent all those years protecting his secret identity. Whatever. But I know what you're thinking. You're thinking,
my friendly neighborhood J-Man, how does any of this fit into the new Captain America Civil War picture me and my friends keep hearing about?
That's a good question. And I have a good answer. The short version, I don't know. The long version, I really don't know. I wouldn't expect to see a school getting blown up, or Reed Richards, or the Punisher, or Daredevil, or a clone of Thor, or even the X-Men. I probably would expect most of the movie to focus on the Superhero Registration Act and, of course, the two sides fighting. But instead of a screen filled with tons of superheroes and supervillains beating the shit out of each other, I'd expect maybe 10. Don't forget, if you like what you've seen here, tell your friends, not just the hot ones, and most importantly, subscribe.